I was a huge fan of cartoons and sci-fi and fantasy when I was a kid. And we're going to do a countdown of my top 5 favorite animated shows from the 80s. Hi, I'm Joe, and welcome to Starbase Nerdtron. So, just to set a few ground rules here, I'm only taking shows from the 80s, and I'm not including anything from Japan. And I'm honestly not a big anime fan. So, the only anime thing that I really, really enjoyed back then was Star Blazers, as we knew it in the US, and Battle for the Planets, and those were both in the 70s for me. So I'm not counting them. If I was counting the 70s, I would absolutely be including stuff like Smart Trek the animated series. So that's I had to draw the line somewhere. So number 5 on the list is Thundar the Barbarian. This was a great post-apocalyptic show that combined sci-fi and magic, and you had the titular hero Thundar, Princess Ariel, the sorceress, and Ukla the Mock, which was this big Wookiee-looking guy. And they would go from place to place in post-apocalyptic North America, going from city to city, basically finding the bad guys who are oppressing local people or wizards or something, and stopping them and freeing the local humans. It was very formulaic. They had some great artwork, though. The backgrounds for that show were just phenomenal in terms of the details that they got. It has a very much of a Gamma World vibe. I'm not sure that the timeline really worked if you thought about it too hard, because they had some stuff, that was obviously from from 1980 or whatever, that supposedly survived 2,000 years, that no way it would have, but who cares? It was a kid's cartoon on Saturday morning, and it was a hoot. And at that time, I was just getting into D&D and Gamma World and Metamorphosis Alpha and those kinds of games, and that just hit the spot. And the combination of sorcery and super science was just such a great thing for me as a kid. So number 5 on our list is Thundar the Barbarian. Next up, we have a tie for fourth place, and this is GI Joe and Transformers. This is Gen 1 Transformers. Um, they're both made of from the same studios. They actually had a slight little bit of a crossover if you count the one episode of Transformers season 2 or 3 or whatever it was, when Cobra Commander came back as the terrorist Snake. Um, and of course, there was enormous crossovers in the comic books between the two. And I really thought a movie crossover, a full blown crossover between the two, would have been just such a mazeballs, but it was not to be. Um, the uh, the the problem with these two shows, and the characters are great. Mostly, the primary characters are great. Let me say, the secondary characters can be kind of cardboard cutouts. Does Thundercracker really have a personality that's different from Skywarp? Not really. Megatron, sure. Starscream, sure. Cobra Commander, yeah. Zartan, yeah. But once you get down the roster about half a dozen places, they're pretty interchangeable. Although you had some wonderful voice acting. Scatman Crothers is in Transformers as Jazz. Just some really great stuff. The where the both shows fall down is that they didn't really maintain any story arcs, and everything was very compartmentalized, very episodic, and a lot of times the plots were just flat out dumb. You get like Serpentor wants to launch uh, a restaurant into orbit, and why? I don't know. He just does. And it's just kind of weird. And you could tell that they were running out of stories at some points, and so storytelling is a little meh, but the concepts and you can't argue with some of the great iconic characters. Megatron is Megatron and Cobra Commander are some of the iconic villains of the 80s, hands down. So you gotta give them something for that. So it's a tie for fourth place. We got GI Joe and Transformers. In third place, we've got something that a lot of people might not have heard of. And this is the Adventures of the Galaxy Rangers. This was a kind of a mid 80s, late 80s show, sci fi, very sci fi. And in a lot of ways, it was kind of a hard sci fi Western. And it dealt with some very serious stuff. It wasn't your usual dumbed down for kids fare in a lot of ways. They had a few funny moments here and there, but on the whole, they had some very serious stuff going on in this show. And what I liked about it, and what you're going to see consistently in this list from now on, is the world building. The world building in Adventures of the Galaxy Rangers is really really well done. They've got all these different almost factions and layers of the history that's going on. You've got the Queen of the Crown with her robot empire, and you've got all these outlaws and things that keep coming back, and they actually make references back to things. And there's events that have happened in recent history. Where you had these super soldiers, and some of them are bionic, and they're not all just the same. One of the things about something like Battle of the Planets was, they were all pretty much the same. All the kids, all five kids or six kids, were all the same, and they all had the same power set. In Galaxy Rangers, that's not the case. You had the captain was had a bionic arm, and one of the guys was like this super soldier from a group of super soldiers that had to get suppressed in the past, and and the captain's wife is being held by the Queen of the Crown in a Go chamber crystal thing. I mean, they had some really, really good layered world building in this. And I find that the stories kind of hold up, even after all this time. You get few dumb clunkers in there, and sometimes they lean too heavily into the Western tropes that are in there. It's sci-fi. Yeah, I get it. It's the frontier. You're going to do some Western stuff, but sometimes it goes a little heavy. But on the whole, they really restrain themselves on that thing, and they have some great villains, and they come back, and they actually, there are stakes in this cartoon. So um, uh, if you can find it, I have it on DVD. It sometimes shows up on streaming here and there on like Pluto TV and stuff like that. So it's worth seeking out if you can find it. Very very well done. Very a lot of people have not heard of this or have seen it. So Adventures of the Galaxy Ranger #3. And next up is one that everybody's going to know, and it's I couldn't not put it in here at a pretty high place, and that is Thundercats. And I'm putting Thundercats in here because the storytelling is okay. They dip more into the silly side of the storytelling, and some of the things are pretty dumb. Some of the plots that Mumra or the mutants come up with are pretty inane. Maybe not firing a restaurant into space lane, but they get up there. But the characters and the world building, you got Third Earth, and there's layers of history, and there's actual stakes. Not in terms of anybody dying because it's a kids' cartoon, but things change in the world based on what's happened in some of the episodes. Not all of them, a lot of them are very episodic boxes that everything's exactly the same going in as it came out. But they have some arcs, and they definitely have recurring characters that really brings the setting to life. You definitely got strong characterization in the primary heroes and the primary villains. Mumra is another one of those just iconic 80s villains. Ancient spirits of evil, transform this decayed form to Mumra, the ever-living. It was just great, great stuff. And then in the second season, they bring in a fresh group of Thundercats to kind of liven things up. It didn't work out as great as it could have, but at least they tried to bring in some fresh blood. So it's definitely really up there in terms of the storytelling. Again, is kind of iffy, but it really makes up for it in the world building, and they have strong characters throughout. Even the secondary villains, even the one shot villains, are very memorable. So in the #2 spot, we have Thundercats. And before we get to the #1 spot, I want to give a quick explanation for why you're not seeing certain things on this list. I'm not including Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I'm not including Smurfs, which was fantasy. It was, but I'm not including uh, He-Man or She-Ra. I those cartoons, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles I watched, He-Man I watched, but it didn't really grab me. I thought it was those are very, very dumbed down, and really more aimed at kids than I at the time was looking for. So they just never really landed with me. I didn't find the world building or characters particularly compelling. Yeah, Skeletor is one of those iconic villains. There's no getting around that, and that's a lot has to do with the fantastic voice acting that he brought to the character. But for the most part, I mean, nah, not I'm not a fan. And to be honest, given a choice between He-Man and Bravestar, I'd probably go with Bravestar for better, more interesting stories. Even though it was also dumb and aimed at kids. But all right. So that said, here's my number one pick. And I hope it's something that you're going to say, oh, right, I had forgotten about that. You're right, it's amazing. And that is Pirates of Dark Water. Pirates of Dark Water was just fantastic. It is fun. It has very identifiable characters. It has some great voice acting. Brock Peters does the voice of Bloth, the big villain. You had Honk was voiced by Tim Curry. I mean, you had some really good stuff in there. And it's again the world building, the whole world of Myrrh is just so well designed. They have this kind of biological technology. They have these guns that are actually creatures that shoot out stuff, and I mean, it's got this whole other. It really feels like a well developed other world that. This you don't see anywhere else. It's got monsters that are consistent and very interesting. It's got this, like I say, this technology almost of living creatures that have been harnessed for specific uses. It's got magic. It's got this threat of the dark water, which unfortunately they never really close that loop. We never really get that. But it's got stories that continue on, and there's threads that continue on through the whole thing and actually develop the story. I mean, it's not nearly as episodic as you would expect one of these Hanna-Barbera shows to be, but it was. It carried forth, Ren is, the Prince of Octopon, and he eventually finds his mother, and then they build on that in the Dark Water, and then you have the Dark Disciple who serves the Dark Water, and he allies with it. But things actually move along. There is a story that is being told, and you see it unfolding in front of you. Even a character like Nibbler, who is just this annoying sidekicky jokester, most of the time, actually has his own art of sorts. I mean, it's really, really well done in terms of, it's visually beautiful. It's fun as hell. I mean, it is just rollicking good time. You can tell, everybody, all the voice actors and everybody is just smiling as they're reading their lines. It's just really, really an enjoyable watch. And if you can find it, it is a pity it did not get another season to carry the story further or even wrap it up. But my gods, it is definitely worth seeking out. So there we are. Hope you enjoyed this trip. I would love to hear what you think of my choices. I'd love to hear your choices. What would be um, uh, your favorites from the era? I'd love to hear. Please tell me in the comments. And hope you're all having a wonderful, wonderful day. And I'll talk to y'all later.